Blindspot episode 6, Cede Your Soul. Now, it's been about a week since I've actually watched this episode because I had a bunch of crazy stuff and I did a convention over the weekend. So, I'm kind of going off of. I read the little bit of information because I was looking and I was like, I barely remember anything from this episode because I just had a really crazy week and I'm still super tired right now as well. I'm possibly getting sick, I hope not. But I do, some of the big things I remember from this episode. I think the most memorable thing about this episode was we were introduced to a young girl who kind of changed the dynamic a little bit of this show. And it was only for this episode. We might actually get to see her come back. And I feel like we will based on some of the stuff that happened with Jane and how, especially by the end of this episode, she's really trying to branch out and truly become her own person, whether it is Jane Doe or Taylor Shaw. Most likely Taylor Shaw in her case, because you don't want to just be Jane Doe and just somebody. So meeting this new girl, I thought was actually pretty interesting. She had a dynamic on the entire team, and it was kind of fun to watch. So I was like, this may or may not be a recurring character. I'm pretty sure she will be based on her interactions with everyone, and it was kind of fun to watch that happen. We get this tracking software that can track every FBI vehicle or pretty much any government vehicle on the planet, and it allows for all these different sort of criminal strike teams. Basically, they can coordinate all this different stuff, like, oh, let's change our path from A to B, and the criminals will know that. They still know exactly where to go. It's like, all right, they're at this road, they turned here, they could go these three possible ways, let's cut them off at this point. So it starts off pretty crazy. We already have something that can just cripple the government basically and destroy a lot of high profile things for them. And it turns out that this whole time this girl wasn't actually, a bad person. She was tricked. And she thought she was working for someone, I can't remember what government organization it was. I don't think it was NSA. It may have been NSA, I can't really remember. But she thought that she was working for someone. It's like, sorry, but this person doesn't exist whatsoever. She got tricked by a guy that she thought she could trust, who was kind of giving her an in and helping her, kind of support the government. And I thought it was just a cool story. There was just this young girl who was kind of trying to make a living on her own, and it was, of course, not exactly the same as Jane, but of course it was slightly similar where she didn't have anyone anymore. She had lost her brother, and she was just on her own, kind of doing her own thing. And unfortunately, she got duped into doing this illegal activity, and instead of actually helping the government like she thought and becoming her own person. So I thought it was cool that she had this story, and we have little nerd fights in this episode about using different sorts of code, which I thought was really funny. That was probably some of my favorite stuff. It's just getting to see two nerdy characters argue with each other, because everyone's just a cop in this show, or an FBI agent, and they're all serious and stuff like that. They have their jokes, but it's just this is what happens, and that's pretty much it. And then it's this episode, we got a lot of back and forth banter and little witty jokes, I was going to do that, I didn't do that just because you said it, and stuff like that. So I thought that was a pretty cool element to this episode. And then we had, of course, Jane and Weller both getting advice to kind of separate themselves a little bit. Jane gets it from this dream she has, which we find out wasn't just some random interpretation. There actually was a guy with a tree tattoo, and we see him at the end. And once again, this kind of brings up the old question, who is them that she can't trust? So he was on the phone with someone, basically saying, hey, I found her. So I don't know what the deal is with him. They had a relationship. She also had all the tattoos on as well. So I'm assuming it was before she lost her memory, because I doubt they made her lose her memory twice. But if they did, that would also be really interesting. But she had, all the tattoos on, and they were together. So there was something clearly important going on there, and he's involved with some people, or at least one person, but it's never just one person. So there's something going on there. They've kind of introduced a new layer, and we're getting back into who knew Jane before she lost her memory. And this was very close to when she lost her memory, I would assume. We don't really know how long she had the tattoos, but I would assume she probably had to have had them for at least a month, because it takes so long to do tattoos. I doubt she just went a full day and here's every tattoo. So, who knows how long exactly that time span was, but this person knew her fairly recently. It had to have been in the past couple of months. So, I'm looking forward to getting that answer, which we probably won't get for another couple of episodes. But they've at least introduced it in this episode. She has the dream, and that kind of leads into sort of a big point of the episode with her and Muller kind of trying to separate themselves a little bit and just be, co-workers. And of course, Weller's getting info from his boss, like, you're not, you're not distant enough from this case, which was an issue even from the very beginning. Like, Reed brought it up, and that was his whole issue, is that Weller wasn't exactly distant. He wasn't just, like, thinking on his feet like he normally does. He was thinking about Jane or Taylor Shaw, especially after she was officially Taylor Shaw, or unofficially. I don't even know what to call that now. But after that happened, which he's still in denial about, he wasn't really the same. So now he's hearing it from his boss, and he's like, all right, he takes the Stonewall approach, where it's just like, especially he had the perfect end for it as well, with Jane's gun being on the wrong side. So that was just like clear, distant thing, but of course that kind of wraps up by the end. And even with everything kind of wrapping up for them by the end, where it's like they can't just be like super distant and cold to each other, it's still not exactly what Jane wants, because it's it still ends up being, even if they care about her, it still ends up being the people that she works with all the time. Whereas she put it, the people that see, she doesn't want to go out and just drink with people that have seen all the tattoos on her body and are wondering, what does this mean, and all these other things. She just wants to hang out with people. And it'll be interesting to see how that carries on throughout the episodes now, because she has kind of reached this point where she isn't exactly happy enough just being Taylor Shaw, like, or just knowing that she's Taylor Shaw. She has to be Taylor Shaw with a life, which makes perfect sense. You wouldn't just want to be the case subject all the time. So I'm looking forward to how that changes what she does outside of the cases. I'd love to see that as well, because we don't really see too much. I mean, it's only really been a couple episodes, but we don't see any of kind of the outside life of these characters except for Weller. Like, we've seen his sister, his nephew, his father, and Zapata has like her little gambling thing, which was also somewhat resolved. I don't know if 100% that's officially done. She said she was done and she's out, but who knows how that happens. Considering she was gambling and was trying to go like double or nothing and ended up like 80 grand in or something like that, or 40 grand. It's hard to be 100% sure, like, oh, she's, settled her debts and everything's done forever. Not 100% sure if I could count on that, but I like to hope so, because I like all the characters, but now she is kind of in a weird position, because she's kind of working with the guy from the CIA, so then I don't know if I really want her to be okay 100%. But that's really it. We get like that little bit from her, and then Weller, who's obviously like one of the two main characters. We get a lot of his backstory, but no one else has anything. Like, we don't know what Reed does on his free time. We haven't seen his place before. We don't know, what the boss does. The only time we've seen her outside of the office is when she's dealing with the CIA guy, so that hardly even counts. And that's still technically involving the casework, because it's just like, oh, well, this is something we found on Jane that affects us from the past and stuff like that. So that's not exactly personal life. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that stuff, like just seeing these characters not dealing with a case and just seeing them develop outside of things. And I think for most characters it would be fairly simple, but for Jane, it kind of works, because she is growing as a character. She's basically being created as a character as the episodes progress, because she had no memory. So it kind of works perfectly for this type of character who doesn't exactly even know who she is or how she typically was beforehand. So I'm looking forward to that, actually. I think it'll actually be a pretty interesting concept for this show, to see where she goes and how that changes even the cases, how she can get certain ideas, maybe even get certain memories just from hanging out and doing random things, because she's done random things in the cases, and that's how she's gained memories. And now she's having dreams on her own. So things are just advancing for her character, and I'm looking forward to that. I think this was definitely a fun episode. I did enjoy a lot of the comedy and sort of the rebel that they had to deal with in this episode. She brought a great dynamic that changed up the normal pace of the episodes, which is always fairly different because they're always dealing with all sorts of crazy stuff. But it is generally, here's the action, here's the crazy super government, crazy super secret type stuff. And this was just a girl who made a mistake, really. She was on her own. She was trying to help the government, and it ended up kind of flipping on her because she got tricked by some people. And now we have a character that can kind of help Jane progress, and they can help each other, where Jane doesn't exactly have to get her memories back, but she can grow as a character still and help this young girl who also has no one, and they kind of develop themselves, with each other. So I think that's a cool concept. The end of this episode, if I'm remembering the very last scene, was Weller going back home and his sister telling their father that Taylor is actually alive. Who knows how that's gonna play out? He was just this. He was really stone faced. Sorry about that. I thought my phone was definitely on vibrate, but he was super stone faced, and I thought that was so funny because, of course, it's like this insanely emotional moment, and his sister's like upset or excited, happy tears and stuff like that. And his father is like just crying his eyes out, and he grabs both their hands, and he's just looking at his hand like, starting to rethink that whole she's 100% Taylor Shaw thing, because he was in complete denial, like, I don't care what anything says. This might change stuff, because we still really don't get why he hates his father so much for what he thinks happened, because it really doesn't make sense. Like, even his sister says, like, do you really think that he, went next door and kidnapped the little girl and left? And I'm still wondering, why do people think that happened? I still feel like we need an exact answer as to why he was the first person and only person, apparently, that was blamed for this girl disappearing. Even though it's like, that family, I guess, I wouldn't think they'd be the prime suspects, but it's always, the people that know the person that goes missing become like the first suspects. And it's like, why is that the case? I understand from them, because we do kind of get the fact that they kind of had to lie about his thing. I hope I'm remembering that right. Like I said a week ago, but if I remember right, they mentioned that could have been an episode before, and I just forgot to talk about it. But somewhere they mentioned that they lied about his alibi and that he was gone. But at the same time, it's like, why would he do that? Like, what would be the reason for him to do that? And if that is the case, why wouldn't he ever tell them where he was? What is it that really happened? So hopefully we get that answer. I still do want to know why the city, like that entire town, blamed him, because obviously if the kids lied about his alibi, then either someone else actually knows that the kids were lying to protect their father, or they're just blaming him because he was a next door neighbor. Maybe people just didn't like him. I don't really understand that. But I definitely enjoyed this episode. I hope we get the character, the young girl, to come back. Or young woman, I just said. She wasn't a little kid. So I hope we do get her character to come back. I'd love to see her and Jane actually go out for drinks. I think that would be an interesting scene, because it's a new person who doesn't really know anything about Jane. Jane really doesn't know too much about her, but they are kind of in a similar circumstance where they're just figuring out themselves. And obviously for Jane, she's trying to figure out herself right now and basically an entire former life. So I would love that scene. I enjoyed this episode. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And I want to know what you guys thought about the young woman in this episode. Like, would you like for her to come back? Do you think she did create a good dynamic, or was it an annoying dynamic to you that didn't really help the show? Obviously, I really liked her character. I wanted to come back for sure. I think there's a lot of great potential for her and Jane to really develop as characters, especially for Jane, who's obviously she's the main character, but I think they could develop this side character as well and just see her grow and possibly become a main member, of the team. I think that could totally be possible considering her skills. is a fairly easy integration. I think that could definitely work if they wanted to kind of play around with that idea for like season 2, and they just decide like, all right, let's bring her in. Then we have like two nerdy scientists, and they can have banter, and it'll be even more silly stuff happening. But I want to know what you guys think. So like I said, please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.